How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Sportified. This is episode 1. I'm Kher, and with me, as always, will be Sid Pandey.
Thanks, Sid. Pleasure to be here. And yes, this is episode 1, and we are 1 month away from the greatest show on earth, the Tokyo Olympic Games 2020, which are being hosted in 2021. These are special times, these are extraordinary times, these are not normal times. So, what we're going to do is put this Olympic Games in perspective for all our listeners in historical context. Where do they stand? Has there been a precedent? What it means to be an Olympian? Should these games go ahead? Why are they going ahead? And if they go ahead, where will it rank? How will it be seen? How will history be written when these games are done or when the final whistle is blown? Sid, Tokyo 2020, never been anything like it.
Nothing like it. I don't think anyone was prepared for something like this. The world was not prepared for what came and hit them right up in the face. But rest assured, with the amount that you've just said, that I mean, there's so much to the Olympics. It's not possible to jam it up in one conversation. So this is going to be a multi-part series where we'll further jump into further detail about our athletes, the Indian contingent at Tokyo.
Absolutely. It is a very exciting time for Indian athletes that are heading to Tokyo. Of course, we will be diving in depth into the Indian contingent in a later episode, into the next episode, actually. Right now, what we're trying to do is tell you all about Tokyo, this Olympic Games, and everything around it, because there's a lot that's happened. There's great uncertainty around the games. Should they happen? Should they not happen? As things stand, a month before the Olympic Games, we are going ahead. There is absolutely no doubt about it. The IOC, the Japanese government, the athletes are already, some of them are already in Tokyo. As things stand, the Olympics are going ahead. I'll just like to quote David Goldblatt here, a writer I absolutely adore. The Olympic Games have become the single greatest festival of a universal and cosmopolitan humanity. That is what these games have become. Japan has an opportunity to host these games. They had wanted it to be something completely different. We will talk about that. But Sid, for you, before we talk about these special Olympic Games, what does it mean to be an Olympian for you?
Wow. Now that's just such a heavy question. What is it? I don't think, as far as I can think, or as much as I put myself in that position, I don't think it would do justice for me to kind of relate to that feeling, because I don't think I can put myself in the position to the blood, sweat, sacrifice, and everything that just an athlete goes through to break through and to get to represent his country, let alone to represent the country at the Olympics. Having said that, I was fortunate enough to work on this film, which was based around the time of the Olympics, and I had the opportunity to role play an Olympian, and damn, that was crazy. I'm going to just share this little moment that we had. I get emotional when I talk about it. So we were shooting the scene of where the Indian team lines up and the national anthem is played, and we were shooting.
The Indian hockey team, that is.
The Indian hockey team, sorry. This was the film Gold. And we all stood in that lineup, and at the stadium that we were shooting, on the overhead speakers, they started playing the British national anthem. They obviously didn't have the Indian national anthem. And we just didn't connect, you know. Nobody told us, but somebody had cued the Indian national anthem, and we didn't see it coming. So the next shot, when they shot and when we actually did roll and the Indian national anthem played, I'm getting goosebumps right now. And to just witness your nation's flag being hoisted in a foreign land while that national anthem played, when we cut, we were all teary-eyed. And we were actors playing a part. But that responsibility that lies on the shoulder of an athlete, I don't think it'd be fair for me to have an opinion as to, what it takes or what it means to be an Olympian. I think you should shed more light on it. You come from a lineage of sports. So all yours, brother.
I'll tell you why I asked you that question, Sid, because it's not possible to talk about the Olympic Games or what it's all about before understanding what it means to be an Olympian.
Right.
These are the people that make this event special. Uh, and for me, Olympians are not ordinary people. Olympians are extraordinary people that do extraordinary things. They do not live ordinary lives. They inspire people. Let me give you an example. The most watched event in India during the last Olympic Games, that was Rio Olympic Games, was the badminton final, the women's singles badminton final between Carolina Marin and PV Sindhu. It's great, when we talk about these two athletes, they shed light on what it is to be an Olympian. Carolina Marin, for example, she's unfortunately gotten injured and
Right.
won't be participating in the Olympics this time around. She was the defending gold medalist. Comes from a small region of Spain called Huelva. She comes from a country in Europe that has never produced a badminton player of any repute. None. Men's, women's, doubles, no one. From there comes this girl, left handed, plays left handed, who, along with her coach Fernando Rivas, has decided that she does not only want to be the best player that Spain has ever produced, the best player that Europe has ever produced. She does not want to be the greatest badminton player of her generation. She wants to be the greatest badminton player of all time. That is the dream that she has set herself.
Goat dreams.
It's unbelievable. On the other hand, we have PV Sindhu. Just go through, if you get time, just Google PV Sindhu's training module or training schedule before the Rio Olympic Games. Months before the Rio Olympic Games, she surrendered her cell phone to Pulela Gopichand. Gopichand told her that if you want to be a medalist at Rio Olympics, these are the 10 things that we have to do. He gave her a list. One of them was, of course, you've got to surrender your cell phone, no social media whatsoever. You get up at 4:30 a.m. That is when they would start training every single day, apart from rest days, obviously. And the schedule, there was no life beyond that.
Right.
There was no partying on Saturdays or having family get-togethers or just going off to meet your friend if you're bored. It is pretty much one-dimensional. They do not have a life beyond sport. And if you don't lead that sort of life, you're not going to make it to the podium. You're not going to make it to the podium because there is someone somewhere in the world who's just going to outwork you.
And probably doing that, or probably following that same regimen that you're not.
Absolutely. So Olympians, not just pro athletes or elite athletes, but Olympians who get onto the podium are people who do not include in their lives mundane things like going for a drive one fine day,
Right.
taking a day off. It just does not happen. They are the most single-minded people on earth.
Right.
And I asked you that question, what it means to be an Olympian, because we have not heard from any athlete. Yes, they've asked questions, to be fair, like Roger Federer, who
Right.
asked publicly, we need clarity, are the games happening or not? But we have not seen any athlete come forward this year. I'm not talking about last year where, okay, the world had just been afflicted by the pandemic and
Right.
people wanted it to be cancelled. But apart from that, for these athletes, this is the stage they all want to be on. This is where they want to be. And it is the biggest moment of their careers. And that's why you will not hear any athlete saying, we want the Olympics cancelled. Every athlete that I know, and I know some, especially from the Indian hockey team, they can't wait to land in Tokyo. They can't wait to land in Tokyo and they can't wait for this to go ahead. Now we'll talk about the Olympics, because until we know what it means for an Olympian to get to Tokyo, it would be not quite right for us to talk about the Olympic Games.
Right. Right. No, but just listening to and falling back on everything, I think the sacrifice and dedication, these are the two things that I think these people have that is from another planet.
Absolutely.
I can't think of living my life like that. And if anybody who's listening to this, any common person who thinks they can, try it. You won't last a week, not even a day, maybe. So yeah, credit where credit's due. and let's just take off. Yeah, rightly so. I had this thought as well at a point in time: should the games be cancelled? Because we did know that it was moving a year ahead. It's being played out in 2021, which means you're already shorter on time for the next Olympics. So considering athlete preparation, we know it's a different event. It's not your usual run of the mill competition. So I did share that thought too about should we, because once this is done, you're going to be hitting the next Olympics sooner. Will the athletes burn out, etc., etc. So that's where I was at.
Absolutely, and just going through the history of the Olympic Games, has there been a precedent? Have we been here before? Not quite,
But we
but
have.
but we have, and I'd just like to shed light on Olympic Games that share a similarity with the Tokyo Olympic Games, and there are a couple of them. We'll just quickly go through them. I think one of them that comes closest to what's happened right now to the world is actually the 1920 Games in Antwerp. The 1920 Games in Antwerp were held in the aftermath of two devastating events. The first one, it was obviously the Spanish flu. 2019 is when it hit the world. It hit it hard. Our country, thousands lost their lives. And the bigger event that was really the backdrop to these games was this First World War. The First World War had just ended. Uh, these games was they've come to be known as the funeral games. Death was in the air, quite literally. Uh, and Europe was in turmoil. The Russian Revolution had just taken place. The Bolsheviks had just come to power. There was civil war raging in that country. So Europe was in turmoil. The First World War had ended, but devastation was everywhere. The Antwerp Games were cancelled first, and when they were held finally in 1920, it was quite improvised. It was not very well planned, thought out over a 4-year period. First World War had just ended. They patched together whatever they could, and they threw open the games. 1920. For a long time, until then, even, uh, the Olympics had become the greatest PR exercise the world had ever known. It was the biggest advertisement if you wanted to put your city or something else on the map,
On
your country
the
on the map, right? Belgium was an imperial power, right? London and Paris had already hosted the games. Belgium did not want to be left out, and hence they had wanted Antwerp. Now, Antwerp was already a booming business town. It was a port city, it was cosmopolitan, it was the center of the diamond trade, and it was only, well, a matter of time until Belgium asked for the games and Antwerp hosted it. Well, the games were not very well received. They went ahead, apart from football, they were not very well received. There was
surprising.
just too much on the minds of people in Belgium, in Antwerp, for them to go out and enjoy the games.
Precisely. I mean, yeah, but rightly so. Rightly so. I don't. I mean, if I try to picture that in even today's times, I don't think it would work anyway. I mean, you think of devastation and rather flu and the air you're breathing is literally killing you, and you hosting the games.
Absolutely, and apart from Antwerp, there is one other game that comes to mind. That is the 48 Olympic Games in London. World War II had just ended. London decided to host the games. The Evening Standard carried an interesting report, which was very, very dismissive of the games, very condescending in its tone. It said, and I quote, "The average range of British enthusiasm for the games stretches from lukewarm to dislike." It continues, "It is not too late for invitations to be politely withdrawn."
Wow.
Though the 1948 Olympics did
Did
go
go ahead.
ahead,
Yeah, yeah.
again, much like Antwerp, there were some events which were very well attended, some which were not quite very well attended. The reason was not entirely the devastation caused by the Second World War, but there was a lot else happening. It was the last English tour of the greatest cricketer known to man back then. That's Sir Donald Bradman.
Right.
The Australian team was touring England. Everybody was tuned into the series. It was Bradman's last series. It was announced to be his last series, and it was a great test series.
Single-handedly took away the Olympics.
It,
What an innings.
it did have a massive impact on the Olympic Games and its viewership, because parts of the Olympic Games were televised. BBC did cover the Olympic Games. Most of it was on radio, obviously. Apart from that, it was Britain itself was going through the strictest of austerity measures. It was known as the austerity games, the London Olympics. The athletes that came in were put into category A rationing. There was strict rationing going on, and the athletes that came in from around the world were put in category A. Now, category A rationing was rationing that was given to employees or professions that were involved in hard labor. I'm talking about miners, dock workers, factory workers. So the athletes who came in were put into category A. These sort of things, this was the backdrop for the London Games. But the London Games were extremely important because 1936 were Hitler's Olympics. We know that, why they were held. 1940 were going to be the Olympics of Imperial Japan. Imperial Japan were going to, it was cancelled, of course, because of the Second World War. But there was this toxic imperialism that had seeped into the Olympic Games. The 48 Games were a resumption to normalcy. So it was extremely important for them to be held. What else was important about the Olympic Games? The participation of athletes at the 48 Olympic Games were more than any other Olympic Games. More than 4,000 athletes from 59 countries. Decolonization had well and truly set in. There were new independent nations that came to the London Olympics, including India and Pakistan.
Right.
It was the first time. Yeah, it was post-partition. It was independent countries that went to the Olympic Games. It was very, very important for these games to be held for a lot of nations, including India. The 48 Olympics, the Indian hockey team went. It had to prove to the world that we were still masters at hockey. We won. It was absolute euphoria. So the Antwerp Games and the 48 Olympics comes really, really close to what we witness now. Millions died in the Second World War. The Holocaust drew a long shadow around the world, not just around Europe. Antwerp as well, there were still dead bodies in the battlefields of Belgium at the Western Front. People who came, or participants who came to the Olympic Games, actually went to the battlefields and picked up souvenirs, German helmets, army helmets, the jack boots, stuff like that were picked up from the battlefield. So
Wow.
it is not the first time that death has stalked the Olympic
Let alone
Games.
those medals. We've got different kind of medals with us.
Exactly, so there has been a precedent. But there's one crucial difference for me, Sid, and that crucial difference is these devastations had ended. There was an end date.
Right.
We are in the middle of a pandemic. Now, if we talk about Japan, Japan is going through a fourth wave. Vaccinations are less than 1% of the Japanese population. Japan is an aging population. The dangers are real. 48 Olympics, World War II had ended. Yes, of course, there was, the devastation of bombs being cleared from city centers across the UK, rationing, austerity, all of that. But World War II had ended. There's no doubt about it. The pandemic has not ended. It is amongst us. And I think that is one difference that sets these Olympics apart from Antwerp in 1920 and London in 48.
Yeah, I think each one unique in itself, and challenges and questions, I think, can come up separately for all of them. But coming back to these games, we know pretty much, like you said earlier, they are going ahead. There is no turning back now, and we're a month away. Where do you see this going as far as, do you think the athletes are going to be prepared? Are we going to get to see a 100% deliverance at the Olympics, if I may use that word.
It is so difficult to say. We are going ahead. There's no doubt about it. Everyone, all the stakeholders, I mean, apart from Japanese people, are pretty gung ho about it. So 70-80% of the IOC's revenue comes from the Olympic Games. That's from the Summer Olympic Games, let me be very precise. A big chunk of that comes from broadcast revenues that it gets from NBC, the American broadcaster. Let's take the NBC for example. The NBC has lined up more than 8,000 hours of coverage, live coverage. I'm talking about, forget the pre-show, post-show, non-live action, the highlights reel that will be played. I'm talking about 8,000 hours of live coverage broadcast straight from Tokyo.
Wow.
They've got experts lined up. They're going to be paying billions for this. The biggest chunk of broadcasting revenue for the IOC comes from the NBC. Now, we also have to consider that the money that the IOC gets, it re-spends in promoting sports, Olympic federations in underprivileged, sorry, not underprivileged, but
Underdeveloped nations.
underdeveloped nations, and so on and so forth. The Japanese people are not very excited, and we cannot
Yeah.
take away from that, and we will come back to that. But for the IOC, for the athletes, for the Japanese government, uh, they are going ahead with it. There is absolutely no doubt about it.
I read this article that said they had about 400,000 odd signatures from the locals who didn't want the games to go ahead. Uh, Secondly, I still think what is the Olympics without the fans? You know,
They're still to take a call on that. Will spectate? Look, foreign spectators have been banned, and nobody's going to the Olympics from any other nation. Uh, People in Japan are seriously worried with the volume that's coming in already. More than 90,000 people are going to descend on Tokyo in a month from now. That is a lot of people from all over the world. Vaccination drives in a lot of countries has not picked up. We know that. All these many people coming into Tokyo from around the world, they are yet to take a call whether they should let spectators in. That will be just unreal to have the Olympic Games without spectators, to not hear that roar when the gun goes off and the fastest human beings race towards the finish line in the 100 meters, men's and women's. That will be a very, very strange feeling. That is just going to be something that we've not been witness to. Now, we saw empty stadiums even in Rio.
right?
It was normal times, it was normal Olympics. The organizers said that the tickets have been sold and we have sold these many tickets, but people did not turn up for whatever reason. There were empty seats at a lot of events in Rio. But Tokyo, right? Not normal times. We don't know whether spectators will be allowed. The call has not been taken as yet. So it's just quite strange. The
Yep.
entire situation is quite strange. We know how stringent the rules are for everyone coming into Tokyo. The athletes are going to take time to adjust to these, situations where the protocols are just so different from any other Olympic Games.
Strange one. It's going to be. I don't know what to even look forward to, but it's going to be quite an experience. Like I think this whole the past 2 years have been quite an experience. It's the first time sport, I think, by and large, has been without fans. I don't think it's ever happened before. So it is. It is. Stranger things can happen. But yeah, any final thoughts on Tokyo?
Yeah, sure. Every Olympic Games has a symbolism attached to it. There's a message that every Games tries to send out. We know what Hitler was saying in 1936. It was all about racial superiority. We are the master race, X, Y, Z. Imperial Japan would have tried to say the same thing. Beijing 2008 was all about China's arrival on the world stage. Putin went all out with the Sochi Winter Olympics. 1964 was the first time that Tokyo hosted the Olympic Games. What was the symbolism attached to that? Japan tried to say, we are back. We are doubling our GDP. We are Asia's most industrialized nation. It was what the Times called the sci fi games. It was the first time at the Olympic Games that computers were used. The
Right.
world was amazed to see bullet trains, super highways that Japan had built. It was truly remarkable what Japan had achieved post the Second World War, and they wanted to showcase that. That is what 64 was all about. 2020 was going to draw inspiration from 1964, and it was going to go a step further. Tokyo 2020 was going to be all about the future. It was going to be about robotics, robots driving cars or driverless cars, ferrying athletes from the airport to the village. It was going to be about Japan's electronics industry. It was going to be about gadgetry. It was going to be about the future. Japan was going to try and bust myths that an aging population is not a dynamic population. It was going to use the Tokyo Games to beat stagflation that has plagued the Japanese economy since the 1990s. Tokyo 2020 was going to do a lot for Japan as a nation. It was going to shed new light on what Japan is, what Tokyo is. 64 recast Tokyo as a city. It became a city of the future. 2020 was going to do that and more. It was going to say Japan is not just still a force, but we are a country of the future. I think all that's gone. All of that has unfortunately gone. The Japanese people have turned against the
Right.
Olympic Games. One of the motivations that is being spoken about for Japan to host the Olympic Games is because they want this to be the first post pandemic
Event.
games,
Yeah, yeah.
the big
And the
global
world's going to
event,
be watching.
and the
Yeah.
world's going to be watching. And now people are saying the motivation behind that is because if Japan doesn't host the Olympic Games, the first post-pandemic games is going to be the Winter Olympics in Beijing. And China is going ahead with it. They are not going to say we're not going to host it, or we know what public opinion in China counts for. Unfortunately, not much. So there's a political angle to it as well. So there's a lot at stake. We are talking about billions of dollars in merchandising, advertising if the games get cancelled. You know, there is just so much to lose. And there is the overriding risk of what a lot of virologists have said could be the Tokyo variant, where people descend from all over the world onto Tokyo and they take back with them another strain or another variant,
The
and
Olympic strain.
the Olympic strain, and that could be devastating. But what we do know, and as we've said, is the Olympics are going ahead.
Yep.
They are going to be unique. They are going to be like no other Olympic Games. It's so much uncertainty surrounding the Olympic Games. They are going ahead. Will they go the IPL way? We hope
No.
not.
Yep.
We hope not. We hope it's a safe Olympic Games. We hope
Yep.
even in a limited way, the Olympic Games does bring what it always brings to people around the world, the joy of effort, uh, a celebration of humanity and what human beings are physically capable of doing,
Well said.
which are incredible feats. We hope it is remembered for the right reasons, but we just cannot say whether
Yep,
that
yep.
will happen.
Yeah, having said that, I was just going to say, I mean, no matter whatever said and done, the games are going to go ahead. So we wish them all the very best. And let's hope all the athletes stay safe. And we do not have an Olympic strain or a Tokyo variant that comes back. We will be back with another one, another episode that will focus solely on our athletes, our contingent at Tokyo, across the various sports. So stay tuned and look forward to that one. In the meanwhile, if you haven't checked out our website, give it a look. It's pretty cool. And that's all that we have for today about Tokyo 2020 in 21. So we'll see you guys in the next one. I'm Sid Kher.
I'm Sid Pandey, and for the next episode, we have for you a very, very exciting episode where we will analyze what Grace Note had to say about our chances at the Tokyo Olympics. More importantly, we'll go through or run through the entire Indian contingent.
See you in the next one. We're out of here.